Hello, and welcome to Ask an Archaeologist. I'm Paul Duncan McGarrity. Hello and welcome to another episode of Ask an Archaeologist with me, Paul Duncan McGarrity, and welcome back to the first question and answer session of 2020 and of this series. We've got a couple of questions to go through, so thank you to everyone who sent those in. But first, I also want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has helped support the podcast in recent times. We have the coffee link. If anyone has any, if you enjoy what we do here and if you'd like to support it, it would be very much welcome if you can give anything at all. That would be great. Particular thank you to Richard, who has been very generous in recent times. It has been a huge boon in making sure that this whole venture continues onwards. So that's out of the way. The next thing to say is, we're doing the question and answers, which means that I am joined as mostly, not always, mostly by Laura. Hello.
Hello.
Right. So, you need to know two things for this episode. Number one, we are under bizarre time restraints because we are recording this whilst our child is asleep. And he has not been sleeping very well recently. So we could be either like happily filling an hour, or this is a 15-minute kind of like filler episode more than anything else. So we've got like a time bomb on the table with us with an unknown fuse.
It's going to add a sense of urgency.
Oh yeah, a real sense of like, no waffle, get through these questions. And the second thing is that the reason our bub has probably not been sleeping very well is that he's got a little bit of a cold. He started in at nursery, he's got a bit of a sniffle, just a blocked nose. But it's all right though, because babies definitely don't lick everyone around them and put their fingers in people's mouths. And it's not like one member of this podcast today has caught said sniffle and is struggling with a face, which is, I'm going to say 98% snot.
About maybe 99.
99.
I'm currently leaning backwards. So
like away from the microphone, but it's either
sniff too much.
Yeah, it's either she lays away from the microphone and is a bit quieter than me, which is the case anyway, or you hear the quiet drip 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 of snot onto the microphone.
I got two tissues rammed up there.
Yeah, it's magnificent. I'm starting to get the sniffles, so maybe
another time pressure.
Yes, yeah. You hear me get more bunged up as the episode goes through. So without further ado, thank you very much for listening in. Here is a question and answer. Ask an Archaeologist. So who have we got first?
Okay, so your first question this time is Kavi Gupta. I hope I'm saying that right. And they ask, how plausible is it that our view on what places had civilizations in ancient history is biased towards deserts or places where stuff lasts longer? And then they go on to say that question is inspired by wondering why modern-day Iraq, Syria and Egypt are so heavily emphasised in ancient history.
That's a really interesting question. I don't think there's one issue at play there. So obviously the emphasis they're referring to is actually, that's several different things going on there, because in Iraq and Syria, that's seen as being the first places that civilization, when we say civilization, meaning sort of like sedentary farming and the first cities, so Uruk and are in the Levant, right? And places like Babylon and things like that are in that area. So this idea of the city-states, the city construction, that's what they mean by early civilization. And it seems to be the place where the first cities are constructed. So that's one element of it.
So what year is that?
Oh, I'm going to have to look that up. Right, I've had a look now, and it is 3,800 BCE. Because to be fair, I didn't know.
Sorry about that.
You don't need to apologise. It's the, as I say, it's the problem of doing a podcast about all human history everywhere in all places. Right?
What? You're not
all
an expert
all
on
elements of
all
all
of
human
it.
history everywhere. Yeah, it does certainly put pressure on your memory. However, 3,800 BCE is to answer your question.
Okay.
So that's. But it was good that you asked that question, because that was what my next point was going to be. So you're talking about the first people organising in sedentary environments like cities, with food and stuff being brought in from outside, and people who have roles within that society that aren't just sort of self-sufficient farming or hunter-gathering. Right? You start to get the... farming allows you to produce more food. More food means that someone can come along and say, oh, you have to protect this land because it's where you've planted everything, you need to stay here. If you give me some of that excess food, I'll get really good at fighting and I'll protect you. So there you have like different positions. So that's the start of civilization. Comparing it with Egypt, the stuff that we see in Egypt, the things like the pyramids in Giza and things like that, are made considerably later. Like Egyptian prehistory is 3100 BC. So what we see as like the beginnings of Egyptian civilization is 700 years after the founding of Ur. So immediately, you're talking about looking at two different things. The civilization that was producing, the temples and the pyramids in Egypt are like, the Romans were interacting with the Egyptian Empire, and like it's really late Egyptian Empire, but it shows you that they've been around for a very long time, so they're getting a chance to produce more large-scale buildings. And then the final point of it is, yes, that dry, hot countries are going to provide an environment where certain parts of the archaeology is going to survive better. But I think, so that's why I think this question is quite an interesting one. It's this idea of like, why does it get a lot of, why does it get a lot of focus in this idea of talking about prehistory? And it's because some of it is likely to be archaeology that represents the earliest formation of civilizations. Some of it may be because material survives better, or like they're making things that survive better. It's when you are, when you are staying in one place for a very long time, you build up a lot of material. Or if you produce these large scale monuments, then they're, trying to think of it as an example, just completely differently, but like if you wanted to talk about like what buildings survive in English villages, it tends to be like the pub and the church, and the church tends to be built out of stone. Sometimes the pubs similarly, like the lower status buildings around it are the ones that are built out of the materials that go away, the woods and things like that.
So like high status things, more likely to survive.
Yeah.
And if you've been in an area, you're more likely to have built more of those things.
And you're more likely to build, because the Urs are called tell sites, right? And essentially what you've got is these man-made hills, or hillocks basically, that are just clay bricks on top of clay bricks on top of clay bricks. So it's like this hugely deep stratigraphy for them that people dig down and down and down into, because farming has allowed them to stay in one place, and by staying in one place you start to build up material. Yeah, go on.
But what about what about civilizations that maybe didn't use stone or other materials that might have lasted? For example, I can't think where it is, but isn't there a place that has like this amazing mud temple that they recreate every single year?
Yes.
And if they don't do that, it just disintegrates. So
yes.
What's to say that there weren't amazing mud civilizations or something?
Well, it also depends on what you classify as being civilization. This is sort of like one idea of it, but you could quite easily have a society based around
or made out of ice or something.
Yeah.
In with reference to Cavi's question.
Yeah.
Why only in dry countries? Although I suppose you can get a cold desert, can't you?
You can get a cold desert, yes. But that's what I was trying to get at with this idea of the societies that are building things like monumental structures and that have been in one place for a long time. They're more likely to build objects that survive longer or produce more material in a single location. What's to say that a civilization doesn't, what if your definition of a civilization is just that they're building cities and operating in this single structure, you are not allowing the idea of nomadic societies. Is that less civilized? It depends on what you classify as a civilization to be, and so that's
it's complicated.
That's when you start getting into like imperial land rights, like taxation in some parts of, I think it's Uganda, where like areas where people who were subsistence farmers where the tax law basically allowed you to purchase the ground and like live on it and develop it as your own, and areas where they moved in and people were nomadic cattle herders, they were like, well, these people don't even care about the land. It's like, or they're using as much of it as they possibly can, but they made it so that you couldn't purchase the ground, you couldn't purchase any of the soil underground surface, which is causing problems now because people are like, the government's just coming in and whipping people off their land and saying you have no legal right to any of the material under your house, because the people who legislated the imperial phase of this country thought that hunter-gatherers didn't have any ownership of the land because they didn't build, like, it was a really sort of singular vision of what a civilization can be. And in the imperial mindset, a civilization has to be a city-state. A city
with loads of stuff going on in it. That's really interesting, actually.
You can see like it's a problem. The other thing as well, empire is actually a part of it as well. So with Egypt particularly, and in the United Kingdom, you got to think that places like the Sudan and Egypt were under imperial control, and like there was something called.
So what they've had more like
people were just really excited about it. It was seen as something that you went on the grand tour. It's that idea of these incredible monumental structures, because they were a civilization that decided to build massive structures out of stone. They were seen as more evocative than, a great part of the Great Zimbabwe, for example. There's some central buildings that are made out of stone, but the structures around it were probably mud brick buildings, and like you say, without maintenance, those collapsed. So there's archaeological evidence of a massive city around Great Zimbabwe, but what visitors would have seen would have just been the stone structures that existed in the centre, and because there aren't nearly as many of them as there were in Egypt, who bloody love a big stone structure.
Do love a big stone structure. Talking of which, there is another question here from Ashley Hayden. This ties in beautifully.
Yes.
And they ask, what is the best pyramid?
Oh.
Good luck with that.
Okay, that's an interesting one.
And what scale are you using?
Okay, well, the correct answer is the PG Tips pyramid bag, because I know I'm being marketed to, but it did actually really create.
What? You're a Yorkshireman.
Yeah, no,
Yorkshire tea.
Yorkshire tea is in my house. But can I just say, if Yorkshire tea started using the pyramid bag, this boy would be in heaven. But I don't know. Do I want to be should I just say like the Great Pyramids of Giza, or should I be a hipster and be like, actually, it's the Step Pyramid of Imhotep?
What's so great about that one?
It's one of the early ones, isn't it? It's one of, or like the sort of like the general mythos is that Imhotep was the first architect of pyramids, I believe. Again, this is one of those things where
Wasn't that guy in The Mummy Returns?
Imhotep.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the guy.
That's that guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's also there was. Yeah, okay, so the one in The Mummy Returns, the one with there was also a real guy.
Oh.
Yeah. Called, and you're going to love this, Imhotep.
What?
Yeah, and this is half remembered from the one Egyptology class that I had to take.
/ The Mummy.
Yes, mostly The Mummy. Actually, it was from the Scorpion King, who also is a historical figure. Oh, is that a sleepy peep or is he a wakey peep?
Oh no.
What's going on here?
I think it's
a sleepy peep.
Carry on.
Okay. Well, actually, I was going to ask you because whilst I've only very briefly learned about Egypt, one of us has actually been.
Mate, don't do this. I can't remember anything.
I know, but of the things that you saw in Egypt, what actually struck you as being were the pyramids the thing that blew your mind?
No, they weren't. They were amazing,
Yeah.
and going inside one was incredible.
Were you supposed to go inside one?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Although it did feel very, very dangerous.
Right.
Because you're very aware that there is a lot of stone around you.
Yeah.
And it's very dark and very claustrophobic. So being inside it was amazing because they look very different inside. Not only just because they're dark, but they're smooth. So
interesting.
You imagine, on the outside it's all rough and sandstone. And...
It wasn't supposed to be rough, was it? I think a lot of them have lost...
Yeah, they've lost their outer smoothness.
So it should have been bright white.
White, I think it was, but I can't remember. But so inside it's very peculiar. Almost otherworldly. So I can see why there's loads of conspiracy theories around it. But no, it was Luxor that I loved. I thought it was amazing. Absolutely amazing, Luxor.
Yeah.
Just, you could really see civilization. If you see what I mean. You could imagine people being there and moving around it.
Right.
In a way that the pyramids are much more... They weren't something that you lived with.
Well, they're a tomb, essentially. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, it's basically just someone's big extension that they got buried in. They got buried in their extension of their gentleman's protuberance. That's all the pyramids are. For impressive as they are as a feat of engineering, and we should also say there are pyramids in other countries as well.
Are there?
Yeah.
Where?
South America, for example. There's a great pyramid in... There's a great pyramid in Mexico City. And around Teotihuacan. And people are like, oh, well, that's proof, isn't it? That the Mayan civilization built pyramids and the Egyptians built pyramids, so that's clearly aliens did that. And it's like, no, one of the simplest shapes to stack objects is a pyramid. So, yeah, think of, when people make tors and stuff. No, not tors. Am I saying tors? When people stack stones. As a waypoint.
Yeah.
A stack of stones basically forms a conical shape.
I guess so, yeah, because you have the bigger base, don't you? And
exactly.
the higher you get.
Yeah.
It's that does make sense.
That's why there's pyramids around the world. It's because it's a really easy way to stack things.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
So your favourite pyramid is...
Sorry,
not your favourite. It's what's the best pyramid.
Oh, the best.
So you have to really weigh in on this.
I'm gonna really hammer my colours to the... Yeah, I'm gonna stick with it. PG tips.
Okay, so moving on to other stone structures, I guess. I have a question about Stonehenge, says Jen, at Voyager Jen. Couldn't the ancients have built huge earthen ramps, basically buried, to the top of the uprights, placed the lintels, and then dug the henge back out?
I mean, the answer is yes, they could. But I think... from what I understand of like the investigations that have been done around it, the most likely, or the if you go to like English Heritage, and they do quite a nice summary of how they think that it was constructed. It's essentially scaffolding,
okay,
and like ropes and a sort of like a wooden A-frame to pull it up on top. So it's a lot of manpower. It's a lot of, but it's using basic principles of sort of like that have been used in a lot of other structures. Of you can build an A-frame, you can pull rope over the top of it, and I think the idea is, with the investigations and the excavations, if there had been this build-up of soil and then this digging away, you probably would have been able to find evidence of that having,
the
where's the material
earthworks.
going? Yeah.
Well, it's like how when we walk around the woods around here, you were always telling me about ditches.
Yes.
That you can tell.
You can see where the dips, and that's it. You can see that there's
earthworks. Even from a really long time ago, right?
Exactly, and like so they can dig it away, but that if you're building the ramps up around each of them, like what's the process you're doing there? Are you building a ramp or using the soil around each one and then putting the lintel on, or are you just keeping a pile of soil to one side and working your way around the circle until all of the lintels are on, and then where do you put that material afterwards?
Yeah.
And where are you taking that material from? So all of those processes leave evidence, and it seems to me, from what I understand from the sort of the summaries, that the current thinking is that they actually used timber frames and like pulleys and ropes to try and to bring the lintels on top. One thing I didn't know about when I was reading it is that they are not sat flat on top of each other.
Uh-huh.
Like, I don't know why, but I had this impression that the uprights were flat on top and they were just resting on by the sheer weight.
Yeah.
But it turns out they might have like basically like mortise and tenon joints.
Really? They got a joint in there?
Yeah. So they've got like a round dome and then a groove cut into the upright, into the lintels, the bit that goes over the top. So they actually are socketed on.
Okay.
For like, so they're actually like the structural, and there
yeah.
seems to be something called my term. The term I've come across is a joggle, which is like a same sort of idea as an extending piece from one lintel into the other lintel. So it's not just on the uprights; it's between the two pieces that go over the top. That there's connectors as well, so it's quite an involved thing, and they would have had to shape the stones using other stones. And some archaeological excavations have uncovered some of the tools that would have been used to shape the stones. It's fascinating. I love stone. I love it. You've been on drives with me down the A303, and you know what my regular complaint of Stonehenge is.
Oh, but everyone should be looking the other way.
Yeah.
Is it look at the barrows?
I'm such a hipster. Yeah.
You just love, but that's it. They're earthworks, right? And they remain.
Yes, they do. They are.
So therefore, if there had been, But
so
then I guess they
barrows or burial mounds, they're all around. Stonehenge doesn't exist in a vacuum. For anyone who doesn't know about this, there's actually a lot of different Mesolithic and Neolithic sites within the area. The whole landscape is a prehistoric environment with lots of earthworks. Stonehenge itself was reworked about 3 times, something like that. There seems to have been like a smaller stone circle on the outside, and then the megaliths, the large stone circles in the middle, and then they reorganised them a little bit as well. So even it itself wasn't a single phase construction. And there are things like cremation burials in there been found. There was a Mesolithic site which is identified it was found in the 60s when they were putting together all of the visitor centre and everything. They found what might have been like post holes for essentially full trees that they're thinking would have been like a single post in the ground of this stripped tree that was stuck in. And you can see that they were like, how can we? It's not it's not made of stone. It's gone, and we can't make a big feature of it. And everyone's here to see Stonehenge. So how do we? record that it was here for people who want to know.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a big white dot painted on the car park.
Really?
Because that's where the Mesolithic timber thing would have stood. And there's an avenue leading up there and all sorts of stuff. I went when I was at university, and I don't know if they've updated the visitor centre since then. But like I say, it was made in the 60s and 70s, and there was a huge mural painted there showing people dragging the stones on timber wood. And my God, they painted every person there like they've got a 70s haircut and moustache.
Oh, I hope that's still there.
Oh my God, it looks like someone's like made the Village People move it into place. It is simultaneously like the lamest and sexiest mural you could possibly imagine. Like you just,
I'm definitely looking that up.
Yeah, there's just a lot of people dragging a stone, but you can, like, in the back of my head, I can just hear "young man."
We got to have motivational music while you're
Oh,
doing
of course
work
you
like
do.
that.
Yeah. One person sings "young man," and everyone else goes, "There's no need to feel down." Yeah, it's a real work song.
Okay, so last question for today before the baby wakes up.
Yes.
Because I think we're already playing with fire.
Oh my God, yeah. He's already peeped once and he's like, "I am coming back."
Is from someone on Twitter called Tristan the Anarchaeologist.
Mm-hmm.
So, what question do you not like being asked by other archaeologists?
That's a really good question. Not being asked by other archaeologists. That's fascinating. Is there anything I've come home and moaned about? Probably loads. But it's one of those weird ones. Like, anytime I've had something which has been kind of like a sort of a professional run-in with people has been sort of been more like that sort of passive aggressive. I actually have 3 PhDs sort of thing. But that's less of a direct question, right? Did you just have a thought?
I just thought something that you've moaned about before.
What's that?
And that's how I'm not really sure how to explain it other than how like into things archaeologists get, and then they feed off of each other, getting more and more and more into a subject so that it gets more and more niche and more nuanced. And
actually, that is a good point.
To the point where it's not the original question anymore or something. It's like the analysis.
That's a good way of putting it. So it's less about a question. It's more about like the way that archaeologists talk to each other. So any question where the answer is impenetrable to anyone outside of archaeology, I think is probably where the questions that I don't want to be asked, because we shouldn't like. I understand the importance of specialisms and all that sort of stuff, but also, I don't know, there's a point where you've got to be like, why are we doing archaeology, right? And to misappropriate a quote from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, are you doing it for your glory or for theirs? Right? Is it for the sort of the grand idea of the furtherance of mankind? And we're going to share all this knowledge out? Or are you now so far down the rabbit hole that you are looking at, the impact of flood variables on sand particles in this shoe, what I found in my cupboard? It's like, you can go too far down. But even if you do, this is the thing. I genuinely love when people go that far down the rabbit hole. Mm. But I think if you lose sight of the fact that you then need to explain that to somebody else as to why that's important, you lost it. And I've done that. You've mentioned this already. I forgot. Yeah.
Oh, not
the ditches.
Oh, man.
And we were walking in the woods and I just went, oh, wow, there's some ditches there. And then didn't give any further context to it. And you were just like, why? What's the point? What's the thing? And when I took the time to explain it, it's interesting. And that in microcosm is sort of the problem. Like anything where you assume, any question which assumes knowledge on the part of the other person is what I hate.
Ooh.
Because you are either passively or actively trying to make the other person feel like they're stupid.
Ooh. That's deep. And I like it.
You've either been...
Deep like a ditch.
Yeah. Which are really interesting. But yeah, if there's a question that has...
You're assuming that your audience know what's exciting about ditches now, by the way.
Oh, my audience definitely know. If they don't, they're idiots.
We'll wait for the question next.
Yeah. Just a question coming in. So why are ditches interesting?
That's my question to you always.
Well, we'll take that offline. Laura, thank you very much for helping me. Is there anything you'd like to plug?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay.
Apart from my nose.
Well, then I will plug for us. If you would like to ask any questions in the future, or if you would like to request any specific interviews or any deep dives into any particular sites, because that's something we're trying to do in the future, you can get in touch with me on Twitter at AskAnArch. You can support the podcast with the Coffee link, which is in the description of the podcast, or you can follow me on Instagram at PDMcG. That's PEEDEEMCGEE. And until next time, that's everything from me, Paul, and...
Me, Laura?
Yes, you, Jane. Thank you to everyone who has asked an archaeologist. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Ask an Archaeologist podcast with me, Paul Duncan McGarity. The music you were listening to was by From the Ashes. Check them out on Bandcamp. It was produced by me, Paul Duncan McGarity. You can follow me on Twitter at AskAnArch, or you can send an email at askanarch@gmail.com. But most importantly, if you've enjoyed yourself and you think you have a friend who might be interested in the podcast, please tell them about it. Write a review, put up a star rating, let people know that we're here. It's incredibly helpful and much appreciated. Once again, thank you to everyone who has asked an arch. Bye-bye.